The seven seals. Last week we entered together with John in a vision that presented us with a throne room and a lamb that was handed over with a sealed scroll. This week we continue with the same vision, however in chapter 6, and more specifically, we're talking about the broken seals of that scroll.
I encourage you to read through the chapters, even if you don't pay much attention to the details. Just soak in the atmosphere and try to get the big picture. Last week we saw Jesus inaugurated, and we saw him also worthy to handle the scroll and deal with the seals. Now, what does this mean may not be very intuitive to the modern mind, but when we think about it, it does make sense.
We said at the beginning of this quarterly that the book of Revelation is a symbolical book, almost in its entirety. The lamb that we read about in chapter 5 breaks the seals of this scroll, but what do they represent? They are a reference of the spreading of the gospel, and also they portray some disciplinary judgments applied by God with the intention to awaken his people to their spiritual condition. So in a way they are historical, but at the same time spiritual carriers of God's judgment. The first seal is broken, and it's about a conqueror, one who successfully and rapidly spreads the gospel of Christ. And prophetically, symbolically, it represents the first century church, or as we read in previous lessons, the believers represented through the church in Ephesus.
If you remember, this virtual reality that John is experiencing is about the controversy, the challenge against God. It's about the victory of Jesus and his sacrifice. Humanity got a new hope and a new future. But how is this going to develop? How are people going to learn about it? How are they going to choose? Breaking the seals around the scroll one by one, we are getting a peek. Now, for us, most of this is already in the history, but for John, it was a peek into the future from a special perspective. The imagery again is very rich. We see horses, swords, different colors. It's a battle for this world. But some of the specifics in this first seal are the bow and the crown. The gospel message, like an arrow through the heart, was spreading and conquering the world.
Second and third seal. Not good news for the gospel. There is a red horse and there is a black horse. The red horse rider carries a sword, and the piece is taken away from the earth. The gospel is rejected, persecution follows, and blood is shed. Black is opposite of white, as we read in the first seal. It implies that no gospel is preached whatsoever. It is a scarce commodity. What you can buy in normal economic situations with a daily wages is not anymore a one-day food family portion, but only a food portion for one person. It started with a compromise, rejection of the word, and it ended with absence of the word. There is consequences to our neglect of talking to God, and there is consequences of us ignoring living our relationship with God.
So after the initial boom of the gospel, Satan's forces fired back, first with persecutions, but then by embracing the church, just leading it through compromises and modifying its identity. Christianity without Christ, it's a horrible religion. There's still horses, swords, but it's all different when Christ is marginalized or removed. Only if we could learn from history.
The fourth seal is represented by a pale in color horse. Its rider carries the name of death. We're talking about the worst of the worst that can happen to a spiritual being. Real spirituality is dead. New ways of salvation are invented. Corrupted ways of reaching up in heaven are proclaimed. The era of the Dark Ages. It's hard to believe, but an innocent rejection of the word led to compromises, which led to the Dark Ages, spiritual death for this Christian world. It's history, and it's often ignored. The good news, though, is that the oil and the wine are not damaged. The Holy Spirit's still working, and salvation, all those cares, is still available regardless of the circumstances.
If there was famine and scarcity with the third seal, there was death with the fourth, but only over 1/4 of the earth. Would there be light after the Dark Ages?
The fifth and the sixth seal are not about horses or their riders. They have their own specifics. The fifth seal represents the cry of many, many people who suffered for Christ in the Middle Ages. Their cries for justice and judgment, and their promise that there will be an end to all suffering. The sixth seal is about God answering the prayers of those from the fifth seal. There are some nature events and phenomena that took place in the 18th and 9th century that represented the end of this era and the beginning of a new era, the Second Great Awakening. John wept when he was looking. There was nobody worthy to open the scroll and break the seals, if you remember from chapter 5. He was scared for the future, and he was afraid that history might end up badly for the Church of Christ here on earth. However, the Lamb stepped up, took the scroll and broke the seals, and he brought messages that were unfortunately worrisome and full of spiritual turmoil, but with victorious ending.
Today we enjoy spiritual freedom and all the fruits of the Reformation and to the return to the gospel. What a difference it makes. But how easy it is to forget about it and to turn again the focus away from the only power that can transform us and that makes us better.
So join us next week when we continue with chapter 7 and the lesson that talks about the sealed people of God.